Man, what you been up to? You made me pipe jealous a little while back.
I did. I'm packing my pipe right now for this meeting.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. What are you putting in there?
I've got the cult, Blood Red Moon.
Blood Red Moon. Hot dog. What a great tobacco for tonight. Seeing as how we're going to be talking about astronomy. That's apropos.
Great wordplay there, huh?
Mm-hmm. That's actually one of my favorite tobaccos too.
It's a good one. It's actually my favorite aromatic. And I really don't smoke anything but aromatics. I tried Englishes. I just couldn't.
Yeah, I like the aromatic stuff myself.
I even tried Dunhill Nightcap. Everybody screams about how wonderful it is, and I thought it tasted like a boot.
Yeah, it's not for me either.
It tasted like eating a burnt cigar.
Okay, I can see that peaty taste. Right?
Yeah, real peaty.
Mm-hmm.
Had a lot of latakia in it.
Yeah.
Or latakia, however you say it.
You're right, whichever way. I'm not going to correct you.
I'm not sure how you pronounce that particular tobacco. It's kind of a word that's difficult to spell phonetically.
They have a blend that I like. Some people call it Diplomat. Some people call it IQ, and I like both.
IQ, yeah. I've had IQ. I like that one as well.
Yeah, nice and mellow.
IQ is a lane limited tobacco.
That's right.
Yeah.
There's a creme brulee that I like. We have a Mardi Gras blend up here.
Oh,
pretty decent. Yeah, we'll have to trade tobacco next time we meet.
Absolutely. I'll bring you some from. Well, I actually buy all mine online. So.
Okay. Yeah. Brother Martin, good to see you again. Brother Paul, good to see you as well. I see Brother Andrew on here as well.
Brother Troy, good to see y'all this evening.
I see Brother Paul, Brother Griffin in here as well. That's great. All right, brethren, as we tend to do on these Zoom meetings, and I was remiss last Friday for actually having one of these, but given the fact that our lodges are opening back up, I wanted to focus on my lodge, being master this year, and give them my full attention for that evening. With that, I'll give the general disclaimer that I always give for each one of these. Everything that we discuss here is not inside a tiled lodge. Everything that we will be discussing either in the chat or on the video itself is going to be recorded for posterity's sake, as well as for the YouTube channel. So you can see that on YouTube later on, or you can link to it and share it with friends. Just keep in mind what you do and say is recorded for this particular time, and I don't feel like editing an hour's worth of video if you flub. So we'll do some comments later on, but with that, I'm going to go ahead and crack on, as they say, and start the meeting. Again, thank you everybody for joining. I'm going to go ahead and mute all the non-speakers just for my benefit for right now. As we go through tonight, of course, we're going to be discussing the topics that we've been discussing have been the trivium and the quadrivium, those being the first three, the grammar, rhetoric, arithmetic, all of those fun things. Now we're getting into the larger, more complex quadrivium. Tonight's topic is astronomy, not astrology, but a little bit. And we'll talk about that just a little bit too. So each meeting on the Zoom, we always have 6 different things to do, something to research, something to read, something online resources, something to learn about, a discussion, and then a scripture with the close. Something to research. Something to research, well, the difference between astronomy and astrology. Astronomy, of course, is the study or the science of the constellations and the heavenly bodies. Astrology, on the other hand, a little bit different. It's more of a dogmatic instead of science, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Speaking of, something else to research is the signs of the zodiac. While some people consider that astronomy, some people consider that astrology. It depends on which you or what you do with the information you discover by studying the zodiac. And of course, I'm talking about the 12. there are more than just 12, and we'll talk about that some too. With that, geometry being the central core and theme lately in both Lodge and the Zoom meetings, plain and solid geometry, not PLAIN like yogurt or ice cream, but planes and solid shapes, geometrical shapes, and astronomy, or geometrical astronomy. Also, the yearly progress of the sun. I don't know how, if you've been a Mason at all, how you haven't studied that particularly, but it's time for a refresher for all of us. I actually found some more information about that as I was studying for this meeting. So, and lastly, the precession of the equinoxes. Again, there are certain signs that we have, certain things in Lodge that definitely hint to the precession of the equinoxes, and two other things that besides the equinoxes, we have the solstices as well. We'll talk about those. So equinoxes this way, solstices that way. All right. So something to research, all those fun things, just research them at your leisure. Something to read. Stellar Theology and Masonic Astronomy. They actually have a book about this exact topic. Robert Hewitt Brown wrote it. Great book. Not a lot of pictures. You'd think there'd be diagrams and pictures. Not a lot of them in there, but great book. And it actually makes your mind develop some mental images while you're studying those things. As I show you part of my tattoo there. I don't know if you can, well, we'll get to the tattoo later on. But free online resources. I always started off with the Warden's Retreat link. That's the bit.ly/Warden's Retreat 2020. And then, of course, the masoniclibrary.org.au. Put the double dots in there, .org.au. Those are our Australian brothers. The link is right side up, upside down to them. Venus and Freemasonry is one of the topics on that website that is outstanding. And then there's Jupiter, the King of Planets, another great entry at masoniclibrary.org.au. If you get a chance, go check that out. They have a great online resources, and it's very, the papers or the entries, the articles there, it's an online lodge, so some of them from online lodges, but they're very flourishing. They're very esoteric, which is very good too. So let's cut right into it about something to learn about astronomy. Now, I found a Short Talk bulletin all the way back from 1930. Yes, they had stars and constellations back then. It says that straight out that their astronomical references, instead of being astonished that there's so limited amount of astronomical references, we should be surprised that there's so many in the degrees and in Lodge. Geometry and Masonry, we've talked about this in the other Zoom meetings, were originally synonymous, that they were the same term, that geometry was Freemasonry, Freemasonry was geometry. And of course, it's fifth in terms of the 7 liberal arts and sciences, that being geometry. However, the 7th being astronomy, and it's almost like it's like last but not least. And there's something to be said of it being 7th, and we all know that the number 7 is one of those magic with a K numbers. Yet the beginnings of astronomy far antedate the earliest geometricians. So of course they were looking up before they knew exactly how they moved. And it was used to answer the quote unquote why of the celestial phenomena. Basically what they were seeing and why it was moving in those patterns, arcs, circles, circumambulations. The modern days, of course, we have a hard time visualizing anything in the heavens that's not on our cell phones. However, of course, you can imagine the man that actually sees a comet in the middle of the night streak across, or an eclipse or something like that, or something happening where the moon comes in front of the sun, something weird. Perhaps we might be too well educated nowadays to stop and smell the roses, as it were, of the astronomical amazement that occurs over our heads nightly, or even during the day. So again, I encourage you to research the Short Talk Bulletin, volume VIII, that's 8 to you and me, for March 1930. It's number 3, which is weird. So it's volume 8, 1930, number 3. We almost had 3s all the way across, but they screwed that up. So Now let's talk about Masonic rods. You know, it's a joke. So in terms of the rods in the lodge, this is not magic or science. Either one, it's just kind of what is in terms of the lodge and the furniture of said lodge. The deacons have rods. In other jurisdictions, this is kind of interesting. In other jurisdictions, the rods are always blue to imitate the rod of Mercury carried by Hermes. That's another whole subject for almost an hour-long conversation right there. But the fact that a mercurial rod carried by Hermes is supposed to be in our lodges, very interesting. Also, the senior deacon is the moon of the sun. We know that. Square and compasses. I should edit that. The sun represents, of course, the senior deacon. He's east, close to the master. The junior deacon on the other side, he's bisecting the lodge on a an angle there. And his, of course, symbol is the moon. So already right off, before we even start about talking about anything in the lodge that's too astronomical, we already know the cardinal points, right? East, north, south, west. Those are represented in the lodge. So we have some form of being able to orient ourselves. And then we have further physical representations of the sun and the moon right there in front of us. And so much so that we actually put them inside the square and compasses. Very interesting. In terms of the degrees, astronomical references are all throughout the degrees. So, of course, like I said, we have the east, west, and south, and, of course, the place of darkness, north. And interesting why that place of darkness is north. I've heard fable, fiction, and nonfiction as to why we've said that's the place of darkness. We can talk about the ecliptic and why that on the sun's, as it transverses and does its job, why that there is a place that it doesn't really hit. But interesting side note, during my studies regarding the celestial stuff, measures of time. Well, we talked a little bit about this too in terms of what is time and philosophy in one of the other Zoom meetings. But in terms of astronomical observations, you have to understand days and nights were occurring. We see that in Genesis, right? And we say it every time we open and close the lodge. Consequently, though, before astronomy, hours, minutes, high 12, low 12, all that stuff, those are inventions of our mind, depending upon the observations we've seen. So we can literally take physical observations that we've seen and use our mind's eye and come up with these delineations that divide into, 24. And then, of course, dividing those into the days of the year in the calendar. We touched on that a little bit, but we're talking about the sun at meridian. So time itself, in terms of the construct of the hours and the days and the weeks and that kind of fun stuff, those are delineations of our mind's eye. The word celestial and terrestrial, of course, are the brazen pillars. Those are modern. As a matter of fact, I've actually seen some tracing boards and some older hints at what lodges were used and what furniture they had. They did not have the globes on top of the pillars like we do. And as a matter of fact, I've even seen some ancient globes that were placed on top of pillars in New York in the 1930s, right? So it's when you start talking about the globes, one being celestial, one being terrestrial on top of the pillars, that's pretty new in order for us to visualize yet again something that we know in our mind's eye. So Solomon didn't have an idea of either one of those, right? That's the whole point of that diatribe, is that Solomon had no idea about anything on the brazen pillars, anything atop those. That was not what he had. So let's crack on at this. This is great. On the old maps, if you have an old map or even an old globe, you'll see this little line right here. This guy that goes up and down on the line. And you'll also see the tropics, of course, that are delineated here. And of course, this is a map of the world from way back when. But if you look, that little line that goes across and then down on the globe itself, that is the path of the sun. Okay? And that's traced on most older maps and most globes as well. So very interesting that that is the tracing of the sun that we talk about when we're talking about sun reaching its uh, apex here and then the lowest spot here, right? And we'll talk about what that looks like. It's a sine wave. It's kind of neat, right? And it's not like exactly like that across the planet, but we give them a little leeway because, you know, they couldn't view it from space yet. But a sine wave is also a great visual representation of that path of the sun going through its ecliptic. Here's a better visual example where we talk about it going through certain particular signs of the zodiac. So we have the spring equinox, right, starting at the equator, and then the sun goes up and then hits the summer solstice about 30 degrees, and then comes back down to September 21st and hits the autumn equinox, and then comes down to the winter solstice on December 21st, and then returns to the 0 degree mark. And I always make this Mayan calendar joke. Oh God, then it ends, right? After the winter solstice, nothing happens with the sun. No, it just repeats the cycle over and over and over again. And of course, we see it between the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer. I want you to study quickly while I have this up the different signs of the zodiac in the order: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo. So we see that Aries is juxtaposed to Virgo if we go across on a line, but we'll talk about going across on more of a different shape in just a minute. If you're a Scottish Rite brother, the degrees definitely go through some form of cycle as you're following through them. Very interesting concept when you take the how do you say without giving something away, the magnum opus of the degrees, the entirety of the degrees. If you take the whole work and you string together all of those degrees that we've received thus far, that Albert Pike put together, he definitely had an order. And of course, they then continue. So again, you can see how we go from things that are green in one side, and then we wane and wax and wane through the summer to the autumn, and then the changing of the leaves and the colors into the winter, and then the darkness, and then the light again. Thank God. In the Scottish Rite Cathedral in Shreveport, you can actually go in there and you can see on the walls two different reliefs, one being of summer, one being of autumn, or spring rather, and winter. It depends on how you view it. So here's what happens, and I'm gonna do this real quick. If you were to take this end right here and connect it to the other end and put the zeros together, it would look like this, right? So it's that wagon wheel, right? And I'm not gonna go into too much religion tonight, but what it does is it strings together those particular signs of the zodiac. And of course, Libra and Aries are juxtaposed from one another. Taurus and Scorpio, or Venus and Mars, are juxtaposed to one another on this wheel. And of course, Saturn, Satan, that time, that planet, also is listed along with some of these. So the Mercurial Virgo, right, or Gemini and Mercury, Venus and Mars being the two juxtapositions there, right? And so we go from the shortest days of the year to the longest days of the year. But again, this wagon wheel creates what some people call the Celtic cross, right? The beginnings of the Celtic cross. Now, if we take that symbol and we use what we know about the 12 constellations and celestial bodies, we can also derive something like this, where we can actually see those celestial bodies making that cross across each other. And they fold, of course, into a cube quite nicely as well. Here's another great example of the 12. Very, very beautiful artwork. And of course, it's from the Magi. That's another great book. But again, we're talking about geometry here, right? And so geometry is on one side, rhetoric is on the other. You see how there's a juxtaposition with the columns supporting them in the center. Here's another example of the 12. And of course, these are superimposed with the 12 disciples, or, well, each one of those, and then inside of there, and then of course Christ on the chariot with 4 white horses with the cross in the center. So some people may say that these symbols help us teach and learn about what happens throughout the year, but also what happens throughout lifetimes, individual microcosms, not just the year itself, but also the microcosm of our life. Or macrocosm, depending upon how you're looking at it. Here's another great one, and looky there. It actually has the animals associated with it on the outsides here, along with the symbol, the alchemical symbols on those. And of course, it's the ancient cosmic science, of which Freemasonry is the modern survival. I like that phrase a lot. And gives the date of its inception as that which is above the cardinal signs, right? Commenced their reign in 399 BC or BCE. Hey, you know, we're cool here. Commonly reckoned as 4000 BC or before Christ, which added to the current year gives us our Masonic date. And so our dates themselves have to do with the cosmic science of astronomy. Even though we do Anno Domini for AD, or in particular in Freemasonry, we change that around a little bit, and the year of light. Here's another great example of the 12. I don't know if you've ever seen these before. I got all giddy when I found these. In some of the manuscripts, they actually put the 12 on your body. When they do that, of course, you can see how Gemini or the twins is there on your arms, right? You can also see here the scales, right? You can see the scales here of Libra, where you balance things. It's kind of funny seeing the archer on this side. He looks kind of grumpy, but the archer on this side versus the archer on this side, which is not necessarily fully human, because of the hips, right? That hip area. And that's because, well, of who he represents and what that archer is. Of course, there's the Ichthus or the Pisces on the feet. Very interesting too. Capricorn on the shins right there. And then, of course, you've got the Aquarius in between down there, the water bearer. Leo the lion in the heart, and then, of course, Cancer on the top with the crabs. And the easy way that I always remember the horns up and horns down, right? The horns up and horns down of each one is if the one on the top has the horns down and the one underneath has the horns up. So in terms of Taurus and the other there. So the ram, Aries. So here's another beautiful example of the 12 being laden over a human body. And we all know, we've heard before, the body is the temple. Well, the temple's also celestial and also earthly. And so here we are, we're having astronomical signs overlaid on the human form, right? Everybody kind of picking up where I'm going, I think. Here's an astrochemical physiological chromatic chart. Again, something very fun. If you can bend this way, you know, you got, don't quit your day job, because there's some other work for you. But again, what's interesting about this particular physiological chromatic chart is that it tells you the malady, and in order to correct it, look juxtaposed to it, interestingly enough. So you can actually see Scorpio here, and it says, you know, calcium, lime sulfate, procreative organs, vascular coatings, and casts. Well, you go across there, and you see that the cerebrum, spinal cord, and sensory nerves are on this side. Very interesting stuff there. So you can see as well that each one is on that same Aries, Pisces, Aquarius, you know, starts over again, Aries, Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, Scorpio, Libra, Virgo, Leo, and Cancer down the bottom. Here's what that looks like in terms of vibration, in terms of the platonic solids on the left-hand side, and again, that synodal wave going through the different elements. Very interesting in terms of octaves or octaves. And the end and the beginning are all the way down here at the very bottom. It's very interesting. The Russell periodic chart of the elements. If you've never seen the periodic chart labeled this way, very interesting. So it's actually broken down into octaves or vibrations. So again, things from the celestial heavens and things that are physical here, showing their astronomical and geometrical natures. Very interesting. Here's that chart again. And I'm going to show you this, and we're going to go into some discussion in just a second. But I want you to look at this chart real quick and study again. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra. You see the list there. You know, Pisces being there. And then look at this again. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius. I wonder if some of the folks that may or may not have been Masons early on and right after the Enlightenment period knew about this particular progression. And I think they did. As a matter of fact, we can see them here going from left to right. You can see here where you have the scales. You can see Cancer on one side. If you actually plot these out, and I'm going to go back one, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo. Look at there. There's Scorpio right there with his stinger, right? There's Gemini here, right there on the front. And then you've got Libra, the scales going on right there. Look at that. And he's pointing to his chest. We know what symbol that is. Some people say that these guys even look goat-like. Now, of course, that's a theory, right? But all that to say, maybe worth some study. As a matter of fact, since one side of the painting is dark and the other side of the painting is light, if you can see that in the background, you may want to consider studying some of the Renaissance art yet again and seeing exactly what it's trying to tell you about the constellations, the heavens, and even your lodge. I want to go ahead and open it up for discussion after I stop sharing my screen here. Again, I thank you all for attending. I hope that was a satisfactory explanation, or at least a primer on some of the things going on in the heavens there. What do you think? Is that something you guys have seen before, or is that new information? What do you think?
Some of that definitely new information. Some of it's familiar, but like the Renaissance art being, I've never seen that. So that was really interesting.
Have you ever seen the 12 signs of the zodiac over a body like that, Justin? Yeah, very.
I have.
You've seen that, Brother Griffith?
Yes. It's been a while, but I've seen it before.
What was it in reference to when you saw it? Was it like an alchemical manuscript or what?
I think it was an almanac.
Okay. What bearing did it have? Basically, like when you're in Pisces, your feet get cold or something, or
I don't remember. It's been long enough since I've seen it.
Sure.
Number of years.
Yeah, I've seen that. I think Capricorn was actually the knees.
That's right.
Because but yeah, it's bringing everything to man.
Well, of course. I mean, that was the construct, right? What I was trying to remember was Sagittarius and the sagittal bone. That's what I was trying to remember. Is the archer, of course, can have a lot to do with the horse, but that's why we have the sagittal bone, because it's a horse-like. Anyway, it's hips. So, yeah, I never really thought about the progression of the equinoxes and solstices deeply until after my Scottish Rite journey. And, obviously the Scottish Rite is the college of Freemasonry. We know that. But again, being in the lodge as long as I did, I never really thought about the progression or the motions or the cycle of the things, especially when you come in as an entered apprentice. You go through the entered apprentice degree, you go through the fellowcraft degree, and then you hit the pinnacle of something which you don't realize is a cycle that mankind has been going through for hundreds of years. It's one of those things where I felt like I was driving a car with no rearview mirrors, right? You don't think about what happened behind you until you get to where you're going. So very interesting topic. What do you guys have in terms of your journey through Freemasonry and perhaps astronomy?
Well, it's like you said, when I joined, I was blown away by the first 3 degrees. And then when I joined the Scottish Rite, I couldn't believe it. And I started sitting down and I started trying to study what was happening. And then the more I got into it, I saw the old rite of perfection and how they built on it. And I realized that what they were doing was not just an organizational correction of chaos. It was a complete adjustment. And what I don't know yet is if it was because of the times that were going on then, or what they were doing. And it really made me realize that you spend your whole life studying it and you're still not going to get it from me.
Well, brother A.E. Waite said that the keys to those mysteries are far lost, Brother Paul, and yet we've given rebirth to new Freemasonry. And I don't know about that. I kind of feel a little hurt because I mean you always want to dig and find that key, right? Another great symbol for the cosmos.
The key is perfection, and you're not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do?
What do you think, Brother Martin? Do you have a particular experience with astronomy and Freemasonry together?
Not that comes to mind. I'm in the process of studying the Master Craftsman's program right now. Seeing some connections between some of Pike's writings and now with astronomy. For me, it's very deep to get into, and it's taken me a little bit more. I have to go back and read some of the stuff 2 and 3 times to understand it, but it's enlightening, believe me. I don't think you'll ever understand it fully.
Yeah, I think it's neat for me because, about the 6th or 8th month after I became a Master Mason, I'd be reading on astronomy or geometry or geology or another science, chemistry, alchemy, one of those. And I'd be reading on that book, and I started buying more books, right? Brother Paul, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? The addiction set in. I'd been bit, as they say. And I started purchasing more and more. And my wife was like, why are all these books about Freemasonry everywhere? And I was like, oh, I guess they all are. I didn't really think of those being about that too. But sure enough, in whatever aspect or lens you view it through, you'll find that science clearly and carefully orchestrated. I'll tell you that we have a planetarium here in Shreveport. I don't know where the nearest one is to Baton Rouge, but
Baton Rouge has one.
Yeah,
it's,
of course.
Downtown.
And if you get a chance, stargazing would be an awesome opportunity for a lodge to make a way out and go do something together. Right now it's difficult, I understand, but maybe doing some kind of stargazing or celestial gazing to see exactly what's going on now, right? We've had 4 or 5 different astronomical events occur, and even and I'm looking at the faces in the group here. In our lifetimes, certain things have happened astronomically that will never happen again, right? The Voyager spacecraft, for goodness sake, right? I mean, it took pictures of a potato, right? But a potato that took, 36 hours to send back at the speed of light, 36 days to send the signal back to us of what it was doing. So everything from the meteor showers to the blood moons, Brother Joseph, or the super moons that we've been seeing, all of those in those particular orders are never going to happen in that way again. There's other Masonic scholars that have gone deeper into this subject than I have, and even the pyramids in Egypt and in Giza and how they line up with celestial bodies in the heavens are all part of that grand design. I wanted to take a second and I'll show you a little bit of that tattoo that I have, and it's the little hand there, and it's got on the top part on the finger portions, those are all of the 12. And if you actually count your finger portions, there's 12 of them there, little separations. And then underneath are the signs of the planets, right, with Mercury stuck in the middle. I found that was a great tattoo for me in particular because it encompassed all the things we know about. Anybody who's ever existed on the planet so far is embodied in one of those 12 signs, right, of when they're born. In terms of the zodiac and not astronomy, but astrology. Brother Paul, I wanted your opinion on this one because I was thinking about you. Do you have an opinion on whether or not astrology belongs in Freemasonry?
Well, astrology, the problem with astrology is that it studies the planets. And if you don't know all the planets yet, how can you study astrology? All you can do is base it on what you know. And I believe it does have a place in Freemasonry, if only for the fact that it augments and complements astrology. And it kind of fills in areas that astrology doesn't have. And also it goes into areas that you may not, just here, this is a star. Oh, that doesn't tell you what it means or what it does to you or what influence it has on the body or the moon or things. The moon affects, we're made up of so much water, and the moon has a pull on us. And so there's a lot that I can't deny, but I'm not going to be limited or lock myself into something that say, well, this is what it means. Because, every Capricorn is the same. Every Virgo is the same. No, I and I don't want to get into. I've known people that would have full charts made out, and you'd have a whole list of this is why you're you. Well, that's interesting, but I can't say for sure.
Yeah, tell me where my lifeline stops, right? So in terms of horoscopes and that kind of divination, I don't know if that belongs in Freemasonry, but I wholeheartedly agree. I think it's one of those subjects, right, that we shouldn't necessarily throw the baby out with the bathwater in, and definitely worthy of a second glance, if not a deeper study.
Well, I think that astronomy and astrology are both, the way that the ancients thought of them were one and the same. We're talking about the quadrivial study of astronomy. We have to also consider astrology because, Boethius did, Plato did. It was the way it was seen. And the way that they saw the patterns of numbers in the skies influenced the way that they understood certain numerological symbols, right? The seven sisters, the stars of Ursa Major, all of these things that suggest numerological things that, yes, have found their way into the Masonic Lodge. These kinds of connections are made very explicitly in the ancient accepted Scottish Rite from the very first degree, at least in the Supreme Council version of the AASR first degree, which has the ceiling of the lodge room with the depictions of each of the stars that are numerologically significant painted on the ceiling. And the same is the case in the 32nd degree room, and it comes up as well on the 25th. But yeah, so it's pretty ingrained in Freemasonry across at least the ancient accepted Scottish Rite. I imagine it's hidden all over the place in the York Rite.
What do you guys think? Do you think it's hidden in the York Rite, or do you think it's readily available there too?
I'm not sure quite yet about the York Rite. I'm still waiting on the Royal Arch, but the progression from the Blue Lodge to the Scottish Rite, and now getting into the York Rite, you kind of see that solar allegory repeated everywhere, in my opinion.
Yeah, one sees it through analogy a lot. The only times you really hear very much explicitly about the heavenly bodies in the York Rite are expressions like the sun, the moon, the master of the lodge. Just any time that celestial bodies are talked about. But yeah, they're there. I just think that the ASR is a lot more explicit about it.
Well, see, now you've got me, Brother Owen, going back through my Yorkite degrees in my head and trying to think if there were some more obvious hints or notions to those degrees or to those to the celestial bodies.
Well, I mean, they're all over the place, even in the higher ones. Like anytime you see the number 9 having to do with descending into darkness, for instance, the 9 vaults of Solomon or Enoch, depending on the right, it all works out. Usually, that's some people have often tried to interpret that as, the sun's course. And they relate it to that. Like you're going down to your depths is very similar to the sun going down into its depths over the course of going towards the winter solstice and whatnot.
Well, I'll tell you, the Yorkite, from everything that I've seen, is not lacking in any way, shape, or form. It's like it's a different flavor, basically. And the Scottish Rite has a different procedure, and I think it goes back to the way it was created and what its purpose was more theatrical. It's more ceremonial or in depth. It matched more the French personality, I believe. But the York Rite is not lacking in anything. It's just it may not be as obvious, and it may not be talked about. It may not be taught much, but it's most definitely of value for sure.
Yeah, agreed, Brother Paul. I definitely don't. I don't think anybody was trying to say.
No.
Right. But I think
I've heard some say that.
Explicitly stating it, I think, is definitely valuable, though. Yeah, I think that what I found interesting, I found a York Rite second degree tracing board, right? And in that tracing board, the staircase there, of course, like normal, right? We all know some of the symbols and what they refer to. But at the top of the staircase, there's the sun outside, right? But at the top of the staircase, there's a star, right? And so I show some of the new fellowcrafts that we make here in Shreveport. I show them that tracing board, and I say, what do you see that's peculiar here? And they say, well, the guy's standing alone, or, he's standing on his head, or something weird, or something silly, or he's dressed in green and blue. And how about the fact that a star is inside? Right? How about the fact that it's actually throwing off light, and that the star is depicted on being inside, right?
You hit on something. I believe that the York Rite is more in need of having an instructor or a guide to explain the things, whereas the Scottish Rite, one can figure out a lot of the stuff if they're looking for it on their own, whereas the York Rite, you really need somebody to teach you. This means this is, look at that, that's what this means. And if it's lacking, well, the guy who goes through it may not get as much from it, and he said, well, that's not, and it's just one of the structural problems.
I like that. That does make a lot of sense, because, and again, we've seen that theme show up in some of our Scottish Rite valleys, right, where there's almost like a Virgil, right? Somebody to walk them through, hey, this is where you were, hey, this is where you're going, and actually talk them through some of the degrees. Either talk the degree up before you go in, or talk them down after they've seen it, right? But yeah, I definitely think that the York Rite could benefit from that too. And I know that there's no shortage of instruction there. It's just having somebody to have discourse about it and talk about it and walk you through. I think that's another key point. After you got to love the guys that brought me into some of the degrees, because you and I both know I ask a lot of questions. So after I went through the York Rite festival, I had several questions. Well, what does that word mean? Where do you get this from? Where did that come from? Why do we use that symbol, right? All those things. And I asked a particular question about a particular word that we had in that degree, and all of a sudden, it wasn't in the book, and it was asterisked out, and nobody knew. And it took me 3 or 4 months to find out. But I'll never forget what that word means, right? Yeah. And it's scary. It's scary that some of the younger brothers don't know what the words mean and where they came from, or how to take them apart, right?
Brother Troy, I think you originally asked, do we think that it's hidden in the York Rite and more obvious in the Scottish Rite? And I think it's more obvious in the Scottish Rite. It's more talked about. Just thinking of the 18th degree. I mean, you talk about the planets in the 18th degree as you're going through it. From what I can remember of the York Rite degrees, I don't really remember them referring to the planets or the sun and the stars in the higher degrees of the York Rite. But in the Scottish Rite ritual, a lot of our degrees, we refer to the planets and their involvement.
Well, so my wheels have been turning since Brother Owen brought that up, that there's a juxtaposition between the two. And here's a great example for you, the Saint John. How about that being part of something that's in every lodge that is a celestial meaning as well as in a normal meaning there?
Well, that has another meaning too, though. That what some say is that it's John the Baptist that was actually the symbol, and John the Evangelist was the cover to keep the Catholic Church off the Masonry. Now, take that for what it's worth. You know, who knows?
Brother Owen, you had a comment. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, in the Supreme Council's version of the craft degrees, which are depicted in the porch in the middle chamber, they're what were we just talking about? Oh yeah, so the Holy Saints John is a phrase that is associated with York Masonry, whereas, I mean, if you have a visitor to your lodge, if he is a York Mason, you say he's from a lodge of the Holy Saints John. If he is a Scottish Rite Mason, you say he is of a lodge of St. John of Scotland, or of St. John the Apostle. So that, just throwing it out there. The two Saints John always being there is more associated with the York tradition than the AASR, though the AASR certainly uses both of them gratuitously.
Oh, a point about the Saints John, the feast days are pretty much opposite each other in the year.
Yeah, and I'll show you. I'll share this with you real quick. Here you go.
Yep.
So they're the Saints John, and always not always. In some depictions, one line of the circumpunct on one side is shorter than the other, right? Which is supposed to be those. I had a Cowan pop in there just a second ago. Sorry, so are those the solstices, right? Are those the equinoxes, right? We don't know exactly which ones they're supposed to represent. We have a pretty good idea. And then, of course, in the York Rite, we actually go to Patmos, yeah? So that's another great example where we're actually seeing one of the 12, right? One of the disciples. Well,
certainly in the Scottish Rite, yeah, 17th degree.
Yeah. So, in terms of the disciples being part of the 12 zodiological signs, then maybe the York Rite is full of astronomical symbols that we just don't consider them as such, because we think of them as more the disciples or one of the 12.
The Saint John was actually the topic by which the first Masonic paper I wrote was on, and the way I understood it at the time. The way I understand it now, I should probably rewrite it.
Been there. Well, brothers, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I do want to go around real quick and check on see how everybody's doing. We don't get a chance to meet physically as much as we'd like. Brother Stewart, you want to just kind of let us know what's going on with you?
Not a heck of a lot. Just the same old routine. I went to lodge last Friday, yeah, and with you, and just the same old routine around here.
Brother Joseph, how's it hanging?
Well, we've been renovating the lodge. We finally got the lodge room completed. I'm going up there Sunday to hang all the past masters' pictures and put our little black bows I ordered on our deceased past masters' pictures. Other than that, just been trying to work as much as possible. Not a whole lot of that available right now, but the family's doing well, and I'm doing well, and trying to do as many of these meetings as possible on Zoom and other platforms. And just really ready to get back to Lodge and get back to Scottish Rite and getting the York Rite degrees presumed. Really ready for that.
Thank you, Brother Joseph. Brother Reinschmidt, how are things where you are?
Brother Troy, everything's fine. My Lodge Perfect Union had our first meeting last Tuesday night. We had 13 people. It was good to see the brothers in a lodge room setting once again. I think everybody's kind of biting at the bit to get back. I mean, a lot of people are still not comfortable being around a group of people right now. So, excuse me, the average age of our lodge is 65 years old. So we're all in that group where we're affected by it, but we're doing well. And we're hoping to get back into lodge like we used to and start conferring some degrees. And if I can take a moment to remind everybody that today is the birthday of our most worshipful Grand Master, Stephen Storm Allen Pence. So if you have his cell phone number and you can text him a happy birthday wish, please do so. He will be glad to hear from you. But we're doing fine, Troy. How did your meeting go last Friday night?
Well, we had 9 there. So again, the average age of our lodge is in that category. It was very interesting to know that we had the Grand Master in attendance, Brother Secretary, Brother Grandmaster Secretary. I was very, very, very rusty. And I planned on practicing outside, and I'd done some practicing, but going 60 days without seeing brothers face to face and doing the work and going around the lodge room and doing those particular things we do when we open and close, as old hat as it may be, it definitely is there for a reason to do it every time. And it's not only a reminder to me, but also it was a little bit of a bitter remorse that we hadn't had a chance to do that. And we took our time.
For those of you that are familiar with the Scottish Rite Craft Lodges, Wednesday night will be the first meeting of Germania since we've been in this quarantine. And the question is coming up, how are we going to do certain parts of that opening?
Yeah.
And it's going to have to be something that's done. The Grand Master has given us an option, but we're probably going to have to work it out on our own with the District Grand Lecturer and some of the past DGLs that can assist us with that.
Well, and it's one of those things where we started thinking about the degrees and how we're going to actually confer the degrees moving forward with these restrictions. And, is there going to be a permanent exception to Freemasonry where we change the way in which we do the degrees? We just considered it for a fleeting moment, not to innovate by any means, however.
Well, I saw the Grand Master put out a directive this afternoon on what needs to be done to confer degrees. Basically, you have to ask for a dispensation, and there's some restrictions, and you have to have your DDGM in attendance to make sure, I guess, as a compliance officer, when the degrees are conferred.
Yeah. Well, and that was one of the discussions we had because, Most Worshipful was going over, well, I'm going to have to do that. I'm going to have to let everybody know. And indeed, there have to be some direction. So,
yeah.
Lodge was good. Good for brethren to dwell together in unity. That's the catchphrase we say, but it was good. Brother Griffith, how are things in your neck of the woods?
Well, the day that the edict went out, closing everything down, we had scheduled a master's degree the next day, that Tuesday. So we're chomping at the bit to get that one done. But we had our stated meeting, if I can talk, last Tuesday also. So we're anxious to get that.
Excellent. Well, like I said, I know we masked up. We, did our, we didn't meet to eat beforehand like normal, so there wasn't that normal hours worth of camaraderie that we had beforehand. Very peculiar. The silence sometimes is deafening when you realize you go to shake hands and can't. Brother Paul, how are things south of I-10?
Doing good. I'm forced to be very productive. I yeah, I sent off a journal from the Masonic Society today, and they're going to be sending that to the printer. One book came out end of last month, and I'm probably tomorrow sending off another one for the early part of this month. So it's been productive, and it's keeping me up late at night and get me up early in the morning. So I guess that's good. I don't know, but health-wise, everything seems normal. If I have the virus, I don't know about it, so I don't know what to say.
So is that going to be your new normal, Brother Paul? $2 a month?
No. This is hard.
Well, we look forward to them like we always do, Brother Paul. Thank you very much for attending and sharing your insights with us. Thank you. Brother Owen, how are you?
I'm well. I'm just, I am currently driving. It's one of the things that I can still do in this quarantine is deliver carry out. So that's been nice, just to be able to get out of the house and put on a mask and bring food to a bunch of people. It's been fun. But yeah, that's what I've been doing just about every day. Other than that, Baton Rouge Masonic activities are still pretty limited. We had our grotto meet last Monday, and that was pleasant enough. Social distance was pretty well maintained. We were very happy to see each other. It's a good situation. I think as soon as all this stuff sort of starts lessening, everybody's going to be a lot happier.
Yes, agreed. Well, again, brothers, I thank you. I want to close like we normally do, unless I forget, in Scripture. Tonight's Scripture is really simple. Let's see here. We have this one right here. Tonight's Scripture is Hebrews 1, chapter 10. And the Scripture reads, "The heavens are the work of your hands." Thank you very much, brothers. Hopefully I'll be able to shake hands with you one day. Until then, we'll continue to do these on the second and fourth Fridays, just as a heads up for your calendar. That way the first and third Fridays are open. And that way you kind of look forward to the meetings a little bit too. I appreciate you joining. Thank you very much. You guys have a good night.
Good night, brothers. Don't forget, wash those hands and use soap this time, like Mama told you.
Good to see everyone.